Accountability versus involvement, the secret to building engaged business teams. In this episode, John Tonkin from Brain in a Box reveals why true accountability can't exist without ownership and involvement. You'll discover how to move beyond simple task delegation to create genuine team engagement. Learn practical strategies for building pride in process and understand the critical balance between accountability and acknowledgement. Perfect for business owners who want to build stronger, more committed teams while maintaining consistent quality standards. I'm your co-host Anthony Pearl, and this is the Systems from the Box podcast. Let's start unpacking. John, the whole idea of involvement and accountability, there's sort of to and fro to some degree between those two aspects of it. How do you manage that in terms of looking at systems and how those systems are overseen and implemented?
There's not one business owner I work with who is not going to say, look, we just want people to be accountable. If they say they're doing it, they do it. And if they do it the right way, they do it the way we showed them or the way we agreed was the one best way, in their words, and so on. So everyone wants to get to accountability. And everyone has this understanding that accountability is something where I say, Jim, will you do that? Jim says yes, and now Jim's accountable. The problem is Jim might have been saying yes, but meaning no, or thinking no, or thinking if I can, if I feel like it, if I want to, and so on. So we've got to get that whole idea around accountability, that the only way we can get to accountability is through ownership. Somebody will only make themselves accountable, because remember, you cannot, I cannot, none of us can make someone else accountable. You can hold a gun to their head or something like that, but that's not accountability, that's coercion. That's a totally different thing. So we can't make someone else accountable. So if we want somebody to be accountable, we have to give them, help them develop, whichever word you want to use, a sense of ownership. Because if somebody owns something, they will be accountable for it. And so often when we're working with a client, they will say, yeah, look, we figure if you work with us, just the management team, we'll be able to capture all the systems. They'll say, yep, and that's great. And we will be able to do that. And it may be perfect, but there's a real chance that it won't be. And even if it isn't perfect, there's a real chance that the guys down on the floor don't want to put it into practice. Why not? We'll just tell them they have to. And they're good. Did you want to get accountability, true accountability, or did you want to get coercion or, just direct, I told them to, and so on. So very simply, we recognized very early on working with clients that the only way to get people to actually be accountable is to develop ownership. And the only way to really get them to own things was to have a level of involvement. So if somebody is involved in something, even if it's only answering a question at a table or, oh, Jenny, while you're there, can I just ask you, when we're doing this, is it blah, 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 blah? That's right. Oh, good. Thanks very much. That little bit of ownership develops a certain sense of pride, a certain sense of, I did this, I'm part of this, I'm in it, and so on. And it's that which gives us that real accountability. So by having the team involved to the extent we can, and obviously in most places we can't bring the whole team in and so on, but we'll bring different people in at different sessions and have them involved in capturing the processes. That develops a sense of ownership in them and pride, and then that will help build the accountability. And I've seen the evidence for this in real clients and so on. And I'll go back to the very beginning of Brain in a Box when we used to go out and we'd map things using Post-it notes, our custom Post-it notes on a flip chart. I'd roll those flip chart pages up that night, take them home, have them on the floor and map it all on my computer, and then print one or two of them out and laminate maybe one or so of them on for the next morning to show them what we'd mapped, what we'd captured the day before. And the first thing they ever did was to go and look at the one, oh yeah, you've got that. They'd go straight for the one that they were involved in, which is understandable. And then they'd be looking at it and you'd see this little smile when they're pointing at the figure they put there. Everyone has that little thing, I did that, I built that, I was part of that, and so on. When I was in Macquarie Bank, I was part of Puma. We were providing the funds through securitization for Aussie home loans. And we were writing a manual for Lynx, which was the system they used for managing mortgages. And part of my role was to go out to, say, the Octagon out at Parramatta and train the people there in how this worked and how the systems worked and how to use this system. And that was really interesting because I'd go out and work with different people there and work with a couple of people in the IT department and so on. And we'd capture what the system was supposed to be, how it worked. And then we'd be going out there to train people. And by that time, everything in the process had been captured in a beautiful bound book and beautifully printed and so on. And it would go out with me, copies for the team. And we'd get out there and I'd distribute them. And the very first thing they would do would be to pick up that book and not open it. Because on the front, we had a little bit down on the bottom of the page there that said, we'd like to thank the participation of the following people, putting in the production of this book, this system on how to manage arrears or something like that. And they'd go there and they'd read through. Oh, and you'd see their eyes light up when they read their name. And then the next thing they would do would be to go through and find the process they were involved in. But it may sound a bit coy and a bit or whatever it sounds, but what it is, that real human bit, which is the human side of systems, if you like, which is the pride we take in doing things well. Everyone has it. Everyone wants to be able to say, Mummy, look what I did. Daddy, look what I did. Dad, I've done that. Yep. You happy with that, Dad? And so on. Everyone wants to have that little pat on the back. Okay. And so on. And we want to get it ourselves. And the way we get that is not through, are you happy, Mr. Managing Director? No one's going to be doing that. But we do have that sense of personal pride in the work we do. And that's where accountability comes from, through ownership and through involvement.
Hey, John, I just want to take a break from the main part of the podcast for a moment so you can tell us a little bit more about Brain in a Box.
So Brain in a Box the idea started when I was working in corporate. I was working in a couple of major companies, internationals, and I decided that when I went out and started my first business in 2000, that it was going to use the same principles as I had done in corporate world to capture systems and to make them accessible to the team. But I thought, I've got to be able to do this for small to medium business. And that's what we focus on. So we work with the business owner, with the team, to capture what the business does, and then to minimize the risk by going through and looking at all the risks that we have to manage, make sure we capture those and manage them effectively, and also to achieve the benefit. And then we make all that. That's just effectively what it is.
I guess also the thing here is managing when things don't go according to plan, because we're all human, mistakes happen and changes happen that are required for any number of different reasons. And so it's also important to have some level of accountability and a sense of involvement in the process in order to be able to say, well, what went wrong? How can we ensure that it doesn't happen next time? What can we do to improve?
Yeah. And actually, interestingly, that part of the process, what went wrong, what can we do to improve next time, what can we do to avoid this happening again, is really easy to do if we've had involvement leading to ownership, leading to accountability. The involvement means that people understand that we didn't come in and say, this is how you do it. We will tell you how to do it. Because we came in and we said, okay, where does this start? And we've gone through the risks and benefits. We've understood the process and we've captured it together. So now there's a very strong expectation that if there's an issue with it, we will examine the issue together and we'll come up with the answer together. And then we will rebuild the process the way it's supposed to have been. And we'll capture that and we'll, train it and so on, all the rest of it. But it's amazing if you have that approach that takes away any blame, because it's not a matter of the flip side of pride, I suppose, is blame. And so, I did that. I'm really proud of that. And on the other side, yeah, you did that and you're in trouble. We don't want that bit. And the way to avoid that is, one, we've got as many people as we can theoretically, practically have involved in producing the process, capturing the way it works. And then we capture it in a way that makes it so that we can all see that, this was built with us, not with me, not me telling you. And then when something does go wrong, because we've got a visual version of that process, we can easily go through and, generally speaking, easily work out where the problems are And then we have the people who were involved in putting it together in the first place, most times, not always, who can then go back and say, all right, so this is where it went wrong. This is what went wrong. Here's what we could work on, or let's talk about what we can do to now improve that. So you'll get that improvement. There's always going to be something goes wrong. It's a matter of how we manage it. And if we've managed the putting our systems together in the right way, we're going to be managing the rebuilding or correction of our systems the right way a lot more effectively as well. So that's a good point. I'm glad you brought that one up. There is another aspect to that, which is when somebody's doing something and they don't know whether they're doing the right thing or not, because they may have forgotten, they may not have been trained effectively, and so on. And if we've got that openness in the way we develop our systems, someone's going to be much more likely to come up and say, look, I'm sorry, I don't know how to do that, or I haven't been shown how to do that, or I haven't been trained in that yet, or I don't think this is the right step in this process. It's not how we've done it before. And you'll have much more openness in that rather than that hard thing that says, do this, and, do your job and shut your gob and so on. But it really comes from ethics.
And I think as well that, and I was thinking about it as you're talking about, and earlier on about appreciation of different things that people do and how documenting that in the beginning can also be important for people paying attention to it. And then even when looking at where things went right or wrong, that it's understanding everybody's role in the process. And it's interesting to me that we don't do that very often, because I use the sort of, not the greatest example, but just an example of saying, well, someone that brought the teas and coffees in made it possible for people to be perked up enough to be able to, deliver what they needed to deliver for the day. So the tea and coffee, bringing that, which may seem like a fairly menial task because anyone can go and pick that up from the shop and take an order. But being able to do that actually does help the process, and being able to appreciate that is also really important. And it's interesting that we don't tend to do that in business so much. Whereas if you go to the movies, of course, watch the end credits, which seem to go almost as long as the movies these days. And, there's everybody that's done anything that's taken a step somewhere or, waved at someone is the third person of support and the right grip and the this and the that. And, and it's an interesting differentiation between the two.
Yeah, it is. And I can tell you a little bit about that movie as well, and all those movies, because I did some work with music rights and with entertainment group and so on. And that it was all about tracking the royalties for those people. So if somebody was delivering the teas and coffees on set at such and such a place, then every time that movie was shown, they not earned money necessarily, but earned some sort of credit towards something happening later, if that was claimed and so on, if that was part of their contract, obviously. But it is a matter of having all those little things in there. And that's a little bit like that acknowledgement on the front of the process book, the systems book there. Again, just acknowledging it. And that acknowledgement is the basis for pride, but it's also the basis for being paid and so on. So with music rights, for instance, every time a piece of music is played, that little bit of credit goes up for the composer, the person who wrote the music, the lyricist or the lyricists and so on, but then all the performers. So that was actually the one that was done live in Adelaide at WOMAD in 1993. And the performers in that version of it were Peter, Paul, and, but not say Mary, but another group there and so on. But then next time it was performed, it was done by Peter and Bill and Mary and so on. But each one of those people gets their own little share of the royalties coming from that. And so it has to be tracked. That was actually the most complex business I've ever worked with in terms of just the complexity in their process, tracking every bit of the right and therefore the benefit from the work they do.
Yeah, I can imagine. But it does beg the question as well a little bit you talk about accountability and how much of a reward there is for the success of a business for the people that are involved with it as a result. Because if systems are working at their optimal level and are constantly improving to maintain that optimal level, what's the reward for staff, and how do you measure that in different places versus, the profitability of the business and the business owner wanting to make more money as well. So there's a bit of a balance between all of those things, but it's an interesting point of view from all of this, because if you want that involvement and you want that accountability, that's something that you potentially have to look at.
Yeah. Accountability goes with acknowledgement, I suppose, to an extent, doesn't it? Because we want somebody to be accountable for something, which means they have to be known. We have to know who did it. And if if we know who did it, then we should acknowledge who did it. And so it has those two sides. And then sadly, sometimes it also goes to blame, as I said before, but we want to avoid that approach. But it has to have that whole thing where we know who did it, we acknowledge who was involved in it, and we reward the people who were involved in that. And we do that sometimes. I mean, that's what share structures are for. Generally speaking, the people who work in the business aren't shareholders, however. So then you're looking at all the different businesses will have different forms of redress to try and help people earn some money from the effort they put in. Probably not enough of them, but a lot better than it was in the 1800s.
Before you go, don't forget to hit the subscribe button on whatever platform you're tuned to. Thank you for listening to the Systems from the Box podcast featuring John Tonkin from Brain in a Box. Details on how to contact John and his team are in the show notes, along with other valuable links you don't want to miss. This podcast is produced by Podcast Done For You. I'm Anthony Pearl. We look forward to your company on the next episode.